Episode 1 of A Knight of the Seven Kingdoms starts with Sir Duncan, Dunk the Tall, out in the pouring rain by the side of a hill. With his 3 horses watching on, Dunk buries his former master, Sir Arlan of Pennytree, in the ground. And taking up Arlan's sword, Dunk has big dreams to become a noble and honourable man. But in a world like Westeros that thrives on thievery and backstabbing, that's easier said than done. And Dunk decides to head for Ashford Meadow, claiming his master's sword, shield and horses as his own. Before he reaches the village though, Dunk stops by a small inn en route. The place is quiet with barely a soul in the local tavern. A lot of them are out at the nearby tournament where a bunch of knights are on the verge of duking it out. Only one man remains inside this sleepy inn, and after paying with a coin marked by a Targaryen dragon, he takes off for his room. As for Dunk, he preps to head out to Ashford that night, but he's got his hands full right now with the amusing and rather cheeky Egg. After catching him on one of the horses, Thunder, and trading some banter with the boy upon first arrival, Dunk talks about his aspirations. He eventually takes off again, back on the road alone. At Ashford, Dunk speaks to the Master of Games, Plumber, and makes up a story about how Sir Arlan allowed him to be a knight. He didn't, as we soon see, and without a witness to vouch for him, that's not going to stick. However, should Dunk miraculously become a knight, he also has to contend with losing too. Should Dunk lose, he'll have to forfeit his arms, armour and horse to the victor. He doesn't really have the coin to buy them back of course, so he's banking a lot on winning. But for now, with nobody as witness to his newfound glory, Dunk will need to find another at the tournament to help him out. The main player is that of Sir Manfred Dondarrion. Arlan actually fought for his father, so he's hoping that Manfred will be the ticket to entering the tournament. Not after struggling to get through to Sir Manfred on account of him sleeping, Dunk wanders off, muttering and already on the back foot. It's really not a good start. Interestingly, Dunk wanders right into a couple of other core characters in the show, Sir Steffon Fossaway and his cousin Raymond. The pair are duking it out and sparring when Dunk arrives, but he turns down getting involved with them. Now things are not going well for Dunk here, and after several run-ins with prostitutes end badly, Raymond Fossaway eventually catches up to our hedge knight. He apologises for pressuring him earlier on to fight Steffon and invites him over to a party in the tent of House Baratheon. Then inside, Sir Lionel, the Laughing Storm, brings the group together for a big party on the eve of the tournament. A Dunk sticks out like a sore thumb though, and he's clearly out of his element here. He hasn't brought anything for the man, but it actually works in his favour. After telling Sir Lionel he's here for supper, a hearty laugh and some dancing helps lighten the mood. The alcohol only further solidifies their new bond too of course, as Sir Lionel eventually admits Dunk is out of his depth and has absolutely no chance of winning. Now after the party, Dunk finally catches up with Manfred Dondarrion, sporting a woman on either arm. He waves away Dunk's concerns, claiming not to remember Arlan of Pennytree. At that night, a defeated Dunk heads back to camp and finds Egg there. It turns out the boy rode in on the back of a lamb cart, and he's helped out Dunk by making a fire and washing his clothes. A Dunk eventually concedes and allows the boy to stick around, levelling with him honestly about what the role of squire will entail. He promises not to let the boy go hungry and allows him to stay. As they lie under the stars together, Egg mentions a shooting star flying overhead, explaining, in no uncertain terms, that luck is theirs alone to shape. Episode 2 of A Knight of the Seven Kingdoms begins with Dunk recounting the life of Sir Arlan of Pennytree. We see the pair travelling together, including how he never wanted for anything and was apparently a dogged fighter. As Dunk recounts his tall tale, we cut back to the present where our protagonist is actually telling this story to Leo Longthorn Tyrell. Of course, he doesn't remember Sir Arlan either. Dunk is convinced that someone will eventually remember the man, but right now it doesn't look good. Now at the grounds, the Targaryen banners are marched into Ashford Meadow, prompting Egg to head back to camp. Now as for Dunk, he moves in for a closer look, where Baelor Targaryen, and heir to the Iron Throne, is warmly greeted. However, one of the other men here, Aegon Targaryen, mistakes Dunk for a stable boy and a server, until Dunk corrects the good lord. Interestingly, Dunk does tend to Aerion's horse after it lashes out and kicks a man. Now as Dunk speaks to the horse and calms it down, we're introduced to 2 members of the Kingsguard. They're Sir Roland Crakehall and Sir Donald of Duskendale, and they're two of the few people here who actually treat Dunk kindly. They speak to him about their backgrounds, including how Donald is the son of a crabber. Now when they leave, Dunk ends up getting mixed up in political business. He overhears the Targaryens talking about how two of their sons, Daeon and Aegon, have gone missing. Dunk is soon found out and explains he wants someone to vouch for him being a knight. Interestingly, Baelor Targaryen actually remembers who Sir Arlen is. Now Baelor questions Dunk about Sir Arlen, and when Dunk mentions how Sir Arlen defeated Daemon Lannister, it's enough to convince him. However, given Dunk's not of Sir Arlen's blood, Dunk will need to repaint his shield if he's to enter the tourney. For now though, he's given the green light to fight, but he's still got some work to do before he enters properly. After watching a puppet show last episode, Dunk and Egg head over to Tanzel's next show. Dunk calls on her to help paint a sigil for him, and he's going for an elm tree with a shooting star flying overhead. Now outside, Dunk second guesses the way he fumbled his words with Tanzel, and there's a pretty hilarious scene with Egg when they talk about their pitfalls. Dunk flippantly retorts that Egg could become a knight one day, and when Egg says he's puny, Dunk replies that he's stupid. Then Dunk demonstrably proves Egg's point by forgetting the preceding sentence. It's a small segment, but a lovely way to add some levity to the show. And next, Dunk is brought in with Egg to play a game of tug of war with Lionel Baratheon, who asks him to answer the call of war. Dunk's team come out as victors. It doesn't take long for Dunk to meet the blacksmith in these parts, Steely Pate. Dunk doesn't have the coin right now to get himself kitted out, so he's forced to sell one of Sir Arlen's horses. It's a really touching scene, especially when Dunk pleads with the buyer to feed it an apple and some oats. That night, Dunk rejoins Egg, where he learns that Sir Donald, that son of a crabber we met earlier, actually owns half the crabbing properties around Westeros. So much for humble beginnings. Now when the night's festivities get underway, Dunk watches the talented jousters and begins to doubt himself. After all, given no one remembers Sir Arlen, the stories of him being a poor knight seem to ring true. However, Dunk is determined to prove everyone wrong. Episode 3 of A Night of the Seven Kingdoms starts with Dunk fast asleep while Egg lies restlessly, ready to get on with his day's tasks as squire. Then in the morning, Egg tries to talk some sense into Thunder, Dunk's horse, explaining that they're the last line of defence and the difference between Sir Duncan winning or losing. Thunder does eventually begin galloping across a wide open field until they're interrupted by the arrival of Sir Robin Risling. He's known as the maddest knight in the kingdom and a very prolific rider. Now Robin actually lost his eye in a jousting tourney, and after questioning if Egg stole the horse and a bit of banter between them, Egg eventually returns to Dunk. He's awake, but still on edge. Now after initially snapping at Egg, Dunk does soften and the pair work together on the day's chores. There's a pretty hilarious segment where Dunk misunderstands Egg's question about hair before they head into the village together. Now Dunk can't actually take part in the tournament just yet, given the opening games are only for highborns and nobles. This gives Dunk more time to try and woo Tanzel with a classic line of, "Do you like goose eggs?" Yep, it goes about as well as expected. Now the pair have a lovely time watching the jousting though, with Egg wondrously retorting that he'd be happy in a place like this, eating hearty food, watching the games and generally enjoying life. Now Egg has dreams of returning a war hero, taking the second most beautiful daughter after Dunk takes the most beautiful of course. Dunk even decides to let Egg stay on as his squire if he wins the jousting. If being the operative word here of course. However, Dunk is then approached by Plummer. Instead of risking losing all his money in the jousts, Plummer propositions Dunk with unseating Lord Ashford's son, Sir Andro, and betting money on the hedge knight. Now if Dunk could come away as the winner, he'd not only win some cash for himself, but he'd also help undo the financial woes of the tourney's cost in their favour. Dunk is an honourable man and is uncomfortable by the idea of fixing the tournament, but he does agree to think it over. Now when Prince Aegon Brightflame takes to the field next, he decides to choose Sir Humphrey Harding as his opponent. There's a complete mismatch and Humphrey is not just unseated, but the horse itself is pierced and eventually falls on the man's leg. Now Aegon looks to celebrate his victory, but the crowds are livid. Winning in such a dishonourable way doesn't go over well here, and they begin throwing stones and debris at Aegon, eventually needing to be held back by the Kingsguard. It's a small moment, but one that's quite good at reminding us that the Targaryens are not the ruling power like they were in House of the Dragon. Now we're inching closer to the moment the Baratheons will replace them prior to Game of Thrones. The sight is a tough one for Egg to watch though, but Dunk reassures him. telling the young squire that he needs to be strong as there may be a moment where he'll need the boy to help him if things go awry.
In the business, we call this foreshadowing.
At that night, Aegon shows up at the puppet show and sees Tanzel's story with a dragon being slain. Now Aegon, being a Targaryen of course, sees this as a dishonour against his house and starts attacking Tanzel, breaking her fingers. Dunk hears a sickening crack for himself and immediately sees red. He grabs Aegon, throws him to the ground and smacks him across the face. The guards immediately hold Dunk back as Aegon calls Tanzel a traitor and admits that with one of his teeth loosened, Dunk is now going to face a similar fate. Just before things escalate though, and what looks to be a horrific curb stomp, Egg shows up and stops everything. In a shocking twist, Egg reveals that he's none other than Aegon Targaryen, Aeon's younger brother, and a prince to the Iron Throne. Episode 4 of A Night of the Seven Kingdoms begins with Dunk down in the dungeons after the drama with Aegon. Now Egg arrives with some food, but Dunk is not happy about the boy's lies. Now Egg explains that he was hiding with his older brother Daeon in the inn until the tourney was over. Dunk is more hung up over the lies his squire has told and is disappointed in the boy, which actually hits Egg harder than outright anger. He has tears in his eyes as he apologises, clearly upset about betraying the big man. Dunk is summoned to go and meet with Baelor Targaryen here, and Egg is there alongside him as Dunk kneels before the High Lord. He has Egg pour Dunk a drink, where Dunk actually sticks up for Egg, calling him a good boy and a great squire. From the brief interactions here, you can tell Egg is not a traditional Targaryen, wishing that Aegon had fallen and been killed. When he's dismissed, we get more context over the Targaryen brothers. Daeon, the older, stupid knight Egg mentioned, has returned to Ashford and drummed up a story about how a large robber knight has kidnapped Egg. This, of course, is referencing Dunk. At the same time, Aegon is calling the attack against him a veiled attack on House Targaryen, and unfortunately the way that Dunk struck Aegon in the last episode has not done him any favours, given he essentially has two Targaryen brothers painting a target on his back. Baelor explains though that there is a way for Dunk to get out of this. Since Dunk is a knight, he could do a trial by combat, as is the right of any knight. Naturally, this proposition brings him before the two Targaryen brothers, but Aegon outright refuses. Instead, he wants to do a trial of 7. This is another form of trial by combat, but it's ancient by design and few have actually heard of it. Basically, by dawn, Dunk will need to find 6 other knights to fight alongside him. If not, well, that'll show that he's guilty, at least according to Aegon and the rules of the trial of 7. Now, wandering around outside, Raymond Fossway brings Dunk inside for some food, where his cousin Stefan hears about his plight and promises to fight alongside Dunk. In fact, he also vows to bring along Lionel Baratheon and Daemon Lannister too. "You shan't die under my watch, sir. I promise you that," Stefan says, in a touching display of honour and loyalty. Remember this though guys, it'll be important later. When Egg shows up, he does so alongside Daeon. Dunk immediately puts a knife to his neck and threatens to end the older brother, until Egg convinces him to stop. Daeon is actually the man from the inn we saw in episode 1 that threatened Dunk, so it's a nice way of circling back where we started from. Anyway, Daeon doesn't really want to fight, and even offers to just fall over at a glancing blow when the fighting begins. Unfortunately, Aegon is going to be fighting alongside the best in the Kingsguard, so this is not going to be easy. Now Egg has no love lost for his brother, bringing up how vicious and evil Aeon's been in the past. The guy is also delusional too, believing that he's a dragon in human form. Now outside the tent, Daeon admits he's had dreams of Dunk in the past with a felled dragon around a fire. Dunk is alive but the dragon is dead, almost as if he himself slayed the beast. He's also quite remorseful over his lie too, which he apologises to Dunk for. As Dunk continues to wander, he meets up with Steely Pate, who reveals that Tanzel has left his newly painted shield at the blacksmith's cart. Dunk looks over the shield and reflects on his own chances here, as it becomes clear that Tanzel and her family have left for Dawn after what transpired at the puppet show. As Dawn arrives, Dunk shows for the trial of 7, only to find out that Stefan has betrayed him. He switched sides on Aegon's promise of making him a lord. He sees it as a good bargain, but Raymond, having heard of this betrayal, is absolutely disgusted, spits on the ground and refuses to squire for Stefan. With Dunk needing more men, he can't knight the boy, so he leaves that job to Lionel Baratheon to do so instead. Unfortunately, 7 versus 6 isn't going to be good enough here, as it needs to be a fair fight, otherwise Dunk will be found guilty by default. Dunk has little other choice but to give a rousing speech to everyone in attendance, explaining his actions as standing up for the innocent and doing his duty in the name of justice. He laments how nobody is honourable enough to stand by his side, and he's left with the deafening sound of silence. Nobody steps forward until the gates suddenly open. One man rides in at the last second. It's Baelor Targaryen. In a shocking turn of events, he decides to fight alongside Dunk in the name of honour as the big fight looks set to take place. Oh boy, here we go. Episode 5 of A Night of the Seven Kingdoms begins with the duel about to begin. Baelor Targaryen talks about the sobering reality of what they face, a harsh reminder that this isn't going to be easy. Now Baelor decides to face the Kingsguard himself, given they can't touch royalty. After vomiting from the nervousness of it all, Dunk joins the others in donning their helmets and preparing for battle. Dunk is immediately stabbed with a lance from Aeon, and he takes a morning star to the face as well. He topples off his horse and lands in a heap on the ground. We then jump back in time and see flashes of Dunk as a child. In the aftermath of battle, he scavenges for gear and loot off the battlefield with his friend Rafe. The pair are living right in the heart of Flea Bottom, where the place is a tinderbox of hurt just waiting to ignite. Now when they head back to town, Rafe and Dunk are confronted by the vicious Alistair. He's another opportunist and he questions what's in their bag. When he's distracted from a ruckus, Rafe decides to rob an aleskin from the man. Dunk's outlook on life here is quite bleak, although he's still clinging to the faint possibility of his mum coming back. He and Rafe have been saving and looting for a while now to gain passage across to the Free Cities. Despite getting the right amount of coins, the end of the war against the Black Dragon, something is referenced a lot in these flashbacks, and an increase in ferrying people out of King's Landing have seen prices doubled. For now at least, they're not going anywhere. It's here where Alistair returns and demands the pair return his stolen aleskin. When Rafe boldly proclaims they've sold it, he takes their coin purse and slits Rafe's throat, when she tries to steal from him again. When Dunk jumps into fighting, it's Sir Arlen of Pennytree who comes drunkenly stumbling out the back of the pub, fighting with Alistair and his fellow goon. Now Arlen saves Dunk's life, and with Rafe dead and their future bleak, Dunk decides to follow Sir Arlen from a distance. And just like with Egg, Dunk seizes an opportunity to present himself as Sir Arlen's squire. He keeps the distance to begin with, but sickness and weakness start to claim him. Sir Arlen sees this and brings him in as his squire. Now back in the present, Dunk and Aeon wind up wrestling around the muddy arena. Dunk is stabbed a fair few times and takes a dagger through his hand too. It's a brutal skirmish as Dunk loses an eye and Aeon winds up bladed right across his inner thigh. Dunk almost passes out entirely from the pain, but he mounts every ounce of energy he has left and gets back to his feet. This courageous act sees the entire crowd rally to his cause, much to Aeon's shock. Dunk eventually comes out on top as Aeon yields. This ends a conquest and Dunk's team miraculously wins. Now Baelor promises to get Dunk the attention he needs, but there's a problem. He has Steely Pate and Raymond Fosway help remove Baelor's smashed helm, which seems to have a broken visor too. However, when the helmet comes off, it's revealed that Baelor is missing a good chunk of his head following a nasty blow from Aeon earlier in the conquest. Now Baelor turns, collapses on the ground, and falls straight into Dunk's arms. Dunk starts weeping, apologising constantly, as Baelor's death is likely to have huge ramifications going forward. Episode 6 of A Night of the Seven Kingdoms begins with Lionel and Dunk sitting under the great oak tree on the outskirts of Ashford Meadow. Lionel is in a rather jovial mood and tries offering a downhearted Dunk some ale. Now after Baelor's death, the tourney has ended on a sour note for him. Lionel offers Dunk to come back with him to Storm's End, promising to love him like a brother. Despite Baelor's sacrifice, Lionel has no love lost for the man. He points out that Baelor is a fraud, given he fought with little consequence, given the Kingsguard couldn't actually touch him. He sees this as God's will. Gesturing at Dunk, he points out that this is a mockery conducted by those very same gods. Dunk shows up to pay his respects at the roast and speaks to Valar Targaryen. Now Valar is obviously grief-stricken and numb, given his father was wearing his armour when he failed. He questions just why Dunk was able to live while Baelor, a man destined for greatness and potentially the best king since Aegon, has passed. I've asked myself the same thing, Dunk admits, before being dismissed. Now back at Ashford Meadow, Dunk continues to blame himself for Baelor's death. There's a rather tender moment here where Raymond admits he doesn't see him as a villain, nor blame him, and even hugs the big man. Now it's a small moment, but one that's interrupted when Prince Maekar summons Dunk to his chamber. Now Aerion is being sent to the east so he can spend a few years in the Three Cities to help change him for the better. Now Maekar was the one who struck Baelor with a killing blow in the field, and he too is feeling the sting of guilt. However, he also hates that Baelor fought for Dunk, and it was the Hedge Knight's doing that he was put in that sort of danger. Now as for Egg, he wants a squire for Dunk and won't be with anyone else. Maekar has decided that there's a place for them both at Summerhall, but Dunk will need to swear his sword to Maekar, and then Aegon will squire for Dunk. Now while Dunk trains him, Maekar will have his Master at Arms work to finish Dunk's own training. Dunk though rejects the offer and decides he's done with princes. And that afternoon, Dunk confronts Daeon, who wants him to take Egg as a squire. He insinuates that the Targaryen family will poison their young and turn them bitter and twisted if he doesn't do this. It's a way to try and convince Dunk to think over this plan, while Egg shows up in Aerion's room with a knife. Prince Maekar is here watching from the distance, and with tears streaming down Egg's cheeks, Maekar convinces him to drop the knife with barely a word. It comes just in time because Dunk returns and decides to take Egg as squire after all. He doesn't want to take him to Summerhill, but instead offers to hit the road together. Now Maekar is loath to do this, pointing out that Egg is his last son and doesn't want him living in ditches and as a peasant. Before leaving Ashford Meadow, Dunk's old horse Sweetfoot is returned. It's a lovely moment, but Dunk decides she may be better suited for Raymond to go head to the orchard with him. As Dunk contemplates his next move, Egg returns to be Dunk's squire, claiming that Maekar let him go after all. The pair hit the road and Dunk decides they should head for Dawn together. The final shot of these two shows Sir Arlen on his horse alongside them, heading in the other direction. As for the Targaryens, they leave Ashford Meadow, where Maekar scrambles to try and find Egg. It turns out he left on his own accord without telling the others, which brings season 1 of A Knight of the Seven Kingdoms to an end. Thanks for watching, and do let us know your thoughts in the comments below. Smash a like or subscribe to the channel, your support is very much appreciated. I'm Greg Wheeler, and from all of us over here at The Review Geek, we'll see you on the next video.